Hello, everyone. This is Erica Karp at Green Alpha Advisors. In terms of this particular webinar, we had the opportunity to have Dr. Derek Yach, as well as Garvin J. Bush, our Chief Investment Officer for the Next Economy Funds. We are all about solutions. And in this webinar, we are talking about AI and oncology and how we can drive solutions. Solutions in terms of diagnostics, in terms of treatment, in terms of drug discovery, everything that is about a solution to address the world's crisis in terms of burden of disease. In this first section, you will see Dr. Yach talking about where we are and where we hope to be in terms of using AI. So thank you for joining us, and over to Derek.
Good news is that we have seen literally over the last 5 to 10 years dramatic improvements in general approaches to diagnostics and treatment. And with AI, these have been accelerated. So if you said a few years ago, what could we expect? We would have expected a much slower rate of survival, diagnosis, and quality of life. Now I think we can really look at the future through new eyes. First, the opportunities for diagnosis earlier and with greater precision are improving because of AI, plus the technologies associated particularly with imaging, pathology, genomics, blood-based biopsies, and the integration of all of those. Secondly, the treatment options are expanding, particularly in relation to radiotherapy, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, and the appropriate targeting of people who are going to be at greater risk. In terms of actual outcomes and today, we're already seeing these being deployed. And if you think back many years, it was almost unthinkable that mortality from prostate cancer today in the US is extremely low. Survival at 5 years is in excess of 95%. Breast cancer survival for 5 years also 90%, and that's in the US. Lung cancer, though, is still very low, relatively low, 25%. If we look around the world, in Kenya today, for example, the survival for people with prostate is about 60% compared to 95% in the US. And for breast cancer, about 55% compared to 90% in the US. And I use these figures to say that by 2030, we hope that many of the cancers, if not most of them, will start showing survival patterns close to those we're starting to achieve already with breast and prostate. The question will be, can we close the gap between where most of the cancers are occurring, which are low middle income countries, and the US? And that's where I think some of the AI opportunities could have their biggest impact from a public health, and a human perspective. And the challenge will be to see how the investment in that can actually make sure that it works both from a profitability point of view as well as a public health point of view.
Thank you, Derek. Garv, how does it look to you for 2030 and now?
Well, I'm so glad, Derek, that you went first, because everything you said was exactly what I want to build on from an investment point of view. Erica, by 2030, I hope that the word cancer starts to lose a lot of its terror. Like Derek was articulating, we can turn it from a deadly crisis into something a lot more manageable. And investment-wise, I see really 3 specific areas where we're doing that, where we're trying to invest in that. Derek, like you mentioned, screening just becomes routine, almost invisible. You're not going to wait to find a lump. Technologies like Guardant Health are going to make, as you mentioned, liquid biopsies routine. Like you might go to your primary care doctor for your annual physical and get a simple blood draw like you do for a lipid panel today. And you'll see molecular signals that catch cancer at stage 0 years before a scan would have ever seen it. So that's 1. 2, treatment is becoming individualized. We're going to move away from this, what I think is sort of crazy, scorched earth chemotherapy, which indiscriminately poisons all your cells. And think about a company like Moderna with its individualized neoantigen therapies. By 2030, we could be regularly designing personalized cancer vaccines that teach a patient's own immune system to target their specific mutations. And then finally, Derek, you just mentioned something so critical, the equity gap. And here, AI is going to be instrumental. Companies like Tempus AI, which we love, democratizing access to top tier care. So, using tools like Tempus, by 2030, a doctor in a remote rural clinic could have access to the same AI driven treatment protocol as a specialist at Sloan Kettering, just via software. So, Erica, if we get it right in 2030, the cancer industry stops being about building more hospital beds, right? And starts being about better data and smarter biology.
Hmm. So let me ask you something. This is a little further afield and we'll come back. But in terms of screening, so let's say we become really good at screening and people are finding out that they have some cancer, early stages. Where does it go in terms of their being treated? And from a health equity standpoint, do they just live their lives like knowing they've got it and scared? Where's the equity there in terms of treatment?
I really want to hear Derek's input on this, but from my perspective, investment wise, this is still the biggest gap. I just mentioned bespoke immunotherapies, really cool, but still very expensive. Only with scale and operating leverage can these things become cheap, more and more inexpensive, cheap enough to close the equity gap. Just having access to really good screening and then to modalities like how Tempus can provide via software, understanding the best protocol doesn't mean the physician always has access to the best protocol. So the top of the funnel, drug discovery, treatment discovery, genomic therapy discovery, this is wide and growing, especially with recursive AI. The getting down to the bottom of the funnel, getting the genomic therapy transfusion, in your arm, this is the bottleneck, and it's going to be the problem until we get really meaningful, significant scale that can drive costs down and get off patents.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go back to drug
Yeah,
discovery in a minute. But Derek, your thoughts on this gap?
yeah. No, I think it is a real dilemma generally in healthcare. I've seen it particularly in the rare diseases area, where the vast majority of rare diseases that you can diagnose, we don't yet have treatments for. And then the question is, well, if you can diagnose it, what benefit is it to the patient who could be now the very worried about their future, and that itself will have negative consequences. I think my view is that the the benefit of knowing the numbers drives the process of innovation towards treatment. We saw that in HIV/AIDS, where initially we could diagnose people had HIV/AIDS well before the medical treatments became available. The fact that we then had the numbers pushed the pace of change, both to change the pricing, to make it more affordable to people around the world through a lot of discussions and patent negotiations, to now the fact that HIV/AIDS is treated as a chronic disease. I think eventually for cancers we'll go the same route, but there will be a period because there'll be some cases where you'll be screening where you will not either have a treatment or the person will be so far along already that the treatment will not be able to give you the enormous benefit that you'd hope. Um, I think that's why we need to make sure that as we go out with new screening and diagnostic tests, the bioethicists are sitting alongside us, helping us think through what this really means from an individual's perspective and how it can be used to drive innovation to bring the treatments more rapidly. Now, in the area of many of the cancers, luckily in the US, we have treatments that are breathtakingly fantastic. So you can be diagnosed and go on to treatment. In many parts of the world, the reason you can't is because of the pricing. And I think that's an issue where investors working with the leading pharmaceutical companies may very well want to think about how we can use the emerging patent cliff, where a large number of very innovative products are about to come off patent, could actually be the pricing could be made available at affordable prices for developing countries, as we saw Gilead and others do with respect to HIV/AIDS.
Stay with these big companies. So, when you think about whoever, Bristol Myers or Roche or Genentech, what are the big companies doing? And then, Garvin, I'm going to ask you to give us, some of the names that you think are leading in diagnostics. Again, you mentioned one, but big companies, Derek, what's going on?
Well, I think all of them are sitting. First of all, the whole category of immunotherapy and related drugs have really exploded, whether it's Bristol Myers or Merck and Novartis. And very clearly, they're not just focusing on the US market. I mean, I know from some work I do with a group called the Catholic Medical Mission Board that Bristol Myers has been working with them in Kenya and Zambia to start creating model approaches to dealing with cancer in a low-income rural setting, finding that there are ways to adapt the system. I think when you superimpose the potential of AI, we'll be able to have even a greater benefit at a lower cost. And I could go through some of the other companies as well, leading the way. As I said, Novartis in some of their areas. Merck for many years has been involved, not just in the US, but internationally.
Cool. Garvin, your thoughts on small, mid-size, innovative companies?
We've got 3 in our strategies right in this space on diagnostics. I already did mention Guardant Health. Their AI application, they use something they call the Infinity AI platform, which analyzes, like all the AI does, massive data sets of circulating tumor DNA from blood samples. This has extremely high sensitivity. It can identify a tumor from one tumor cell that has been shed from the tumor and is circulating in your bloodstream, or even a fragment of a cell. And their technology uses machine learning to detect what they call molecular residual disease and predict patient response to therapy. So it lets your oncologist tailor treatment plans dynamically based on blood test results rather than invasive biopsies. It also, as you can imagine, empowers very early detection in a lot of cases. Another one we like is Grail. Its AI application is to rely on machine learning classifiers to interpret methylation patterns on DNA. So it's also very interesting, but a different approach than Guardant is taking. They have a test they call the Gallery test. You can order it via your doctor now, although insurance is uneven in covering it. But it's designed to detect a signal shared by over 50 types of cancer from a single blood draw. So the AI is crucial, not just for detecting the cancer signal, but predicting where in the body the tumor might be located. They call it the tissue of origin. So that guides the subsequent diagnostic workup. So again, very early stage detection, very powerful, impossible without AI. In the days of a human looking in a microscope was never going to happen. And then on the more large cap side, Erica, Regeneron, their AI application is Regeneron Genetics Center. It sequenced over 2 million exomes using ML to find genetic links to disease at a scale impossible for humans to parse manually, as I mentioned above. So their oncology focus is a data engine directly feeding their oncology pipeline, which helps identify new targets for their very specific antibodies and determining which genetic populations are more likely to respond to their cancer drugs. So this is Regeneron being a larger pharma. They're applying this same technology to find the exact shape of the lock of your tumor cell and then predict which key is going to fit into it in order to destroy it and provide not only early detection, but also potentially a lot of therapies.
I think just one thing to add, my job is often to be the sort of negative voice of a hardcore epidemiologist and look at some of the numbers. So I think a lot of the claims are way beyond the reality at this stage, particularly on the liquid biopsy side. And it's not good enough to know what is just the sensitivity and specificity. We need to get to more specifics around what are the false positive and false negative rates, because that can generate huge amounts of extra cost in the system. And my reading is that, yes, you've got some of the companies, Garvin outlined very well, or predictive diagnostics on the small side or Roche on the large side, all going after liquid biopsies, which I think in future we will be wanting to go that route. It's going to be less invasive. The amount of X radiation that's going to be given is going to be substantially lower. But I don't think it's yet ready for full-time play. One of the basic reasons is that tests generally work when the prevalence or the underlying amount of disease in the population is relatively high. Cancers are relatively rare in most populations. Some are extremely rare. And that's why one has to look very carefully at what conditions are they testing these liquid biopsies under. Said, I think we're on the road. With AI, we'll probably be able to get there much faster, but we're not quite there. And it does raise the critical need to have very large scale cohorts and biobanks involved in this so that we can actually test these in populations of 500,000 to 1 million people. The good news is that we now have got several biobanks in excess of 500,000 people, whether it's in Taiwan or Singapore or the UK or in the USA.
Derek, if I were to follow up on that, I would ask you, in AI, in all applications, medical or otherwise, the architects of the AI will tell you that it's all about, as you were getting at, the quantity and quality of the incoming data. Yeah. And that is the data set. You were talking about biobanks. We see a lot, especially in the UK biobank, which I guess is a 2 million individual biobank that is one of the world's
eventually
leading.
5 million will be in the system.
Yeah, that's amazing. So as that data set grows and there's more and more from the AI to learn on, part one, part two, an AI architect would tell you algorithms becoming ever more efficient, ever better at deep thinking. And then finally, the substrate of the underlying hardware, just better and better inference, better to process more all the time. An AI expert would suggest that the confluence of those three things eventually will get us to where we need to be having real dramatic impact. And as an investor, getting in front of these, I believe the same. But I have to admit, Derek, it is a belief. I do not know that.
Yeah, well, I think that, just going to the question of the data, the quality of the data, it's not just the quality, it's the diversity of the underlying genomic background of the data. So one very simple reality to address is that Africa is very poorly represented in any of the databases, seriously underrepresented in clinical trials. And the enormous diversity of the genetic pool across Africa is one of the richest. If we bring that into the system, I think everybody will benefit. And that's again where investors with a long perspective, or those sitting on the philanthropic side or the family side of the investment, would see the benefit of looking 10 years down the line to actually build those systems. But as you said, our Future Health, the largest cohort study in the world, is taking shape in the UK with 5 million people. When I look at the recent decision in Taiwan of 500,000 people in their biobank, all of these are going to have a huge impact down the line.
Guys, there's so many questions. So why don't we go to one, as long as we're talking about global, let's talk about the global competitive landscape. I also want to talk about kind of M&A, Garvin, what's going on in that area. But let's stay with the global landscape, competing with China. Garvin, how we invest in China for this. But Derek, give us a broader look.
Well, I think we've seen Kerry Brown and others writing in Nature very recently, and Nature being the premier scientific journal in the world, saying that he's still concerned that people have not appreciated the speed of research and innovation coming out of China, exceeding that in almost every country in the world. And in the area of cancer, when I was preparing for this presentation, I was trying to see what are the most cutting edge papers at the nexus of AI and cancer. And I think the one by Cillian Cheng and her colleagues from Peking Medical Union College, to me, struck me as being, wow, way out there. This is Peking Medical Union College. And the reason I mention them is really for two reasons. First, the roots of Peking Medical College lay in the investments of the Rockefeller Foundation over 100 years ago when they actually created it. 100 years later, we've got this extraordinary resource tapping into the brain power of China. Second reason is that we need to think about having much more open, transparent approaches to how we advance the science and the underlying, particularly the basic science. And I do worry that we're seeing a close down of what normally had been an expansion of intellectual relationships between China, the US, and and Europe. This is not going to be healthy. Thinking that you can take a competitive route between China and the US to solve cancer doesn't actually make sense to me, and I think it'll be damaging to the public health interest. And that's where the investors can play a role in making sure that the way they invest needs to encourage intellectual exchange between the best brains in China and the best brains in the US and elsewhere.
Let's stay with policy for a minute. Now, we know that policy can accelerate progress or decelerate it. So talk a little more about that. We will be hopeful ultimately, but and economics and technology arguably will outweigh policy. But for right now, how bad is it? How bad is brain drain? Thoughts there?
Well, I think it's brain sharing more than brain drain we should worry about. We've got a very significant proportion of the leading cancer scientists in the US are from China. And I think that should be seen as a fantastic resource to actually engage with. Anybody who's visited Shenzhen in the last couple of years will know that it's a city which is sort of the future already today, and not just in the areas of AI and cancer, but in many of the other areas of technology and biosciences. That's why we've landed up seeing the CEOs of many of the leading pharmaceutical companies visiting Beijing and engaging with President Xi over the last few months. The reason is because the high quality of science is happening today, not tomorrow. It's already there. And I think the opportunity is going to be how do we actually take advantage of it? I remember many years ago, Bill Clinton, when he was president, wrote a piece in Science, believe it or not. And the one line I will never forget was where he said that brains are globally distributed, the use is not.
Mm.
And that is the opportunity we all have. And while we're talking about artificial intelligence, remember, artificial intelligence starts with individual human intelligence. How we get the individual human intelligence maximized in terms of the way we engage with people will make the quality of AI and all the other investments even better.
So Garv, let's go to you and the capital markets again. So quick, if you want to say something about global M&A, right? If not, I want to go back to Derek and now I want to talk about drug discovery and we want to hear what's going on there. Garv, anything on M&A or?
Well, I'll just quickly echo what Derek said. He couldn't be more right about all of these topics, especially geopolitically. Uh, Global system level risks are not going to be solved with regional zero sum competitive thinking. We need global positive sum thinking, the brain share. The prevailing attitude in the United States, particularly in Washington, seems to be that China is lagging in technology and therefore we need to be defending our intellectual property from them stealing it. On the contrary, China is leading in so many fields now that we are going to be falling behind if we don't license IP from them. And as such, the global collaboration, the more positive sum collaboration is just going to be critical. And so we do have exposure in China on that basis. Derek's suggestion that investors need to be embracing the leaders wherever they are, I think is absolutely right. I'm not going to prioritize the second best company in any given field, including drug discovery or oncology, just because it's domiciled in the US. That's crazy. I want to own the company with the best intellectual property stack that has the widest moat around it, and it is the most effective modality at whatever it does.
Mhm.
And so I, in many ways, think that geopolitical risk is something that you can hedge against by having global exposure, one, and two, just by making sure that you own the true leader in every field, as it may be. So that their, if you like, better mousetrap will gain market share no matter where the company is domiciled. Yeah, enough with zero sum thinking. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Okay, drug discovery. Derek, where are we and where could we be?
Well, I think first, if we take the sort of history of drug use in cancer, we've come a long way from some of the initial chemotherapy drugs to this whole opening world of immunotherapy, which is becoming much more personalized to your cancer, to your genomic background. And that's likely to simply increase over the next few years. I can see us even learning from the world of rare diseases, where n equals very tiny figures, and you're developing drugs for an individual person or a small group, a small community. Well, the same is going to happen with cancer, where initially we say that somebody's got breast cancer or esophageal cancer, but when you start breaking it down from the genomic background or the specifics of the type of cell type of that cancer, you're actually getting down to relatively small numbers. Historically, we've actually thrown chemotherapy at cancers, um, not being sure what percentage of people are going to be responsive. Well, today we're now starting to see, both through drug discovery and I think the role of AI will play a better role, to look at how are people responding in real time. And it's not just drug discovery. I think that if we think about the fact that if you look at those survival curves, which are fantastic and continue to go up, once you start realizing that cancer will be managed as a chronic disease, it means that you're going to have a large body of survivors, huge numbers, which would be good news. But among those survivors, you're going to have large numbers of side effects and you're going to have comorbidities. And the challenge on the drug discovery side is not just to look at how you're going to actually get people into remission, but how you're going to minimize side effects and how you're going to maximize the fact that when they're on antihypertensives or other therapies for other chronic diseases, that you don't have adverse side effects. At the moment, I think we're still very early into dealing with the multimorbidity that occurs with cancer. We know that as people age, they're going to have many chronic diseases, of which cancer will be one. And yet we've tended to stay in the silos of how you make sure you treat the cancer and then get on with the other chronic diseases. As time passes, drug discovery hopefully will look at how do you maximize it to minimize side effects and to promote overall quality of life.
Stay there for a minute, because in terms of the aging population, we could do a whole call just
Yeah.
on that. We will. But in terms of the aging population and these comorbidities, other chronic diseases, how do you do drug discovery that looks at the comorbidities?
Well, I think that's probably the way it is going. My colleague and one of my mentors, Mahmoud Khan, is heading the Evolution Foundation out of Riyadh that focuses entirely on longevity science, geroscience. And in the meeting I was able to attend not too long ago, what struck me was that the geroscientists are not looking at specific drugs for specific diseases, but they're looking for ways to actually ensure that we slow the process of aging or address the chronic diseases in general that occur through aging. So we've already got a drug like metformin, which is mainly used for diabetes, which appears to increase your probability of longevity, and in the process, you'll have less cancers. We even now starting to look at GLP-1s in the metabolic and diabetes and obesity area. People are saying maybe this is going to turn out to be one of the more powerful anti-aging drugs. And by anti-aging, they mean that it will lower the risk of all diseases. So I think the folk in gerosciences are moving us away from a cancer-specific focus to looking at what are the issues that we can do to promote longevity, of which reducing all diseases will be a key component. And that, again, is something we're starting to see happen through the investments from Evolution and many others around the world.
Derek, you have been generous in allowing me to ask about your personal experience. So if you would share it with everyone, that would be great.
Well, I guess one often I think your own passion for a condition for addressing something comes out of your own experience. And I've now had three cancers, primary cancers: melanoma, prostate, and esophagus. And when I think of the last cancer which I've been treated for, I'm struck by the fact that just about every diagnostic and every treatment modality, and now my follow-up that I've had, from chemotherapy to radiotherapy to surgically driven, AI-driven robotic surgery by the great Dr. Bofa, and immunotherapy, and now follow-up, virtually none of that is available across Africa or most of the low middle income countries, or even parts of rural America. And so I hope through the investments that are going to come in future, we can actually address this reality, because we did it for HIV/AIDS. And I can remember long enough back to when people said there is no way that these expensive AIDS drugs are going to work in low middle income countries and gave all the reasons. It's going to take tough diagnostics that people wouldn't know how to handle it. Well, that all proved to be incorrect. And now we have people living long, healthy lives because both the pricing, the diagnostics, and the infrastructure started happening. I hope that the same can happen in the area of cancer, knowing that the gap between those who need and those who have is even greater than it may have been in HIV/AIDS. I think the other thing I would say from my own personal experience, Erica, and thanks for asking, is that one learns that there are things beyond AI that we need to consider. Um, the meaning of life itself, the purpose, why are you doing things, what drives you into the future. And in that, I've drawn a lot of inspiration from Viktor Frankl's classic book on man's search for meaning, where he came out of Auschwitz and took that experience into becoming one of the leading supporters of addressing cancer patients. It's a book that needs to be read alongside looking at the applications of AI. And I suspect that we will have to always have that deeply human component to dealing with the suffering, the concerns, the worries of people with cancer and their families and friends, while we're dealing with the more technical aspects that AI is so well equipped to address.
I can't resist telling everyone that Derek will jump into freezing cold water to do his swims, and he will even swim around Manhattan. But I mean, the physical aspect of what you've done, and you look wonderful, by the way. Just share a little bit about that.
Well, and first of all, I'm very aware that I am lucky that I have responded well so far to all the treatment. So this may not be the case for so many other people, but I certainly go back to when I was first diagnosed with esophageal cancer. I was told that that'd be the end of my swimming, and swimming has been part of my life, my passion. And after a couple of days, I went to them and explained that I'm actually an epidemiologist, and I wanted to know what was the evidence for why one can't swim. And the initial reasons, this goes for many people who'll be going through cancer therapy, you'll be told infection rates are a real issue. True. So you can monitor the infection rates. When I had my esophagus removed, the concern was you can have reflux from the water and get a terrible pneumonia and die. I said, okay, well, I won't eat before I swim. And then I celebrated 2 years after my surgery by swimming around the Statue of Liberty and continued swimming with a wonderful group of friends. But in the process, it made me relook at the evidence. And again, it does relate to our discussion on AI. Increasing physical activity while going through therapy lowers your side effects and promotes remission. There's hard evidence of this, particularly coming from the breast cancer world. And I think that one of the ways in which AI could help is through the use of different sensors and biomarkers of people going through cancer therapy and long-term, promote and encourage them to live healthier lives and more physically active lives. And that itself will have a benefit on their cancer, but also their overall well-being and sense of mental health.
Thank you for sharing. I don't want to get away. I want to go back to the drug discovery thing because this is, very investable, I would think. So Garvin, go back to the drug discovery question and how do I play it as an investor?
Well, I'm happy to discuss a couple of holdings in drug discovery, especially the AI related ones that we have. But I just have to note, first of all, swimming around the Statue of Liberty. I'm trying to assimilate that, and I just kind of can't. That's a remarkable accomplishment, especially if you're not supposed to be aspirating any water, Derek. I just can't imagine. I can see why you draw so much inspiration from Frankel. Like, I can't imagine the resilience of that guy. I try to imagine that in my own life, and I just sort of can't. Like, I get stressed out if I have a flight canceled on me. And here's a guy who continued to have hope in the most hope absent situation imaginable, surviving the war in Auschwitz. And I just think the resiliency I embodied in him and in you is just, it's something I don't even understand how to emulate, much less be, So I just, wow, I'm just couldn't be more impressed by that. But I think it comes back to your question of why are we even here? We founded Green Alpha because we thought that asset management, quite frankly, was doing a poor job allocating capital to the fixes to our big problems and was spending way too much allocating to the causes of problems. And we wanted to help move the Overton window away from just pouring money on things like fossil fuels and glyphosate and deleterious agricultural practices and microplastics and all the things that we know cause cancer that Wall Street continues to pour money on, and just shift that capital flow into a much more regenerative, positive, as Erica put it, post-scarcity direction. And so if you ask what meaning even means, why are we even here? Why do we even do what we do? That really does frame it for us, even though it's just a pale shadow of the accomplishments of somebody like Frankel. We do what we can do within our silo, within with our expertise in the world. So yeah, thanks. You're a real inspiration. Now, Eric, I'll answer your question. we do have exposure all along drug discovery, and this is part of what I was just discussing, though. We want to allocate assets to be in front of fixes, and drug discovery is one of the big ones. Even if as discussed earlier, the top of the funnel is much wider than the bottleneck at the bottom. It does have to start there if we're going to, one, have very effective therapeutics, and two, eventually get them, and hopefully not too damn eventually, get them to the scale where they are more universally available. And so here's a couple of our favorites. Recursion. Recursion Pharmaceuticals is its full name. Its AI application is Recursion OS. It's a platform that uses computer vision and ML to analyze millions of cellular images every week, and thereby identify disease signatures that humans miss. Here again, it's about the data set and evaluating so many cells and looking for traits in those cells that reflect underlying diseases that might either be far too rare for a human to see, or too subtle for a human to notice, or just simply the volume of throughput that a human could never possibly do just makes it orders of magnitude more powerful than a human postdoc could be. Their oncology focus targets solid tumors and also rare diseases. Derek, they recently partnered with NVIDIA to build a thing they're calling BioHive 2, which almost sounds like a bad sci-fi movie, but it's actually the most powerful supercomputer in the biopharma industry to accelerate these cancer programs. So I think the Recursion NVIDIA partnership is enormously powerful, and it's going to result in some really amazing drug discovery. But here again, it's a question of timeline. And this is another issue with asset allocation, with asset management in general, Erica. It's generally speaking so fixated on this quarter or next quarter that it doesn't want to look at what Recursion is doing with NVIDIA over a 5-10 year period. Investing early in things like this, although obviously NVIDIA is not early and anymore, you could almost argue that Recursion isn't early anymore, although we've been in it for years. We were early. We like to think of that as time arbitrage. What is the potential of this thing 5 years from now, and why don't I buy it at its undiscovered super cheap price right now? Another one we like is Abcelera. They use an AI powered engine to screen and analyze antibodies from your immune system, again at a massive scale, which again compresses years of discovery work into months, if not weeks. Their oncology focus is T-cell immunotherapy for cancer. So they have a lot of strategic collaborations with Insight and with AbbVie, specifically to discover novel antibodies for difficult to treat tumor targets. Derek, you were saying earlier that you were hoping pancreatic could become as routine to treat as like breast cancer. Yeah. And this is one way that could happen, a T-cell engager. I'm interested in your feedback there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I haven't followed in detail, but I mean, you're right. I mean, the figures on pancreatic are still pretty tough.
Yeah. So hopefully something like a T-cell engager that can discover novel antibodies for difficult to treat tumor sites will go a long way towards accelerating the progress there. Finally, a little different one, Twist Bioscience. We like them. They're primarily a synthetic DNA manufacturer, but they do have a Twist Biopharma division, which has both internal and partnered pipelines, developing antibody candidates for multiple cancers, including lung and prostate, by targeting pathways that are difficult to drug with traditional methods. So I selected those three to mention in particular, Erica, because they're all coming at the problem from a different angle. And, earlier we were speaking about the consilience of knowledge and the importance of positive sum collaboration. Well, similarly within any technological realm, but particularly something like drug discovery for cancer therapeutics, attacking this risk from all angles is clearly the way to do it. We want to own a basket of the leaders coming at it from all the promising angles, and that's why I picked those particular three, because they each have their own unique way of doing it.
Erica, if I could just add, I think that I think it's right that we get very excited about the opportunities on the treatment side, but I think I'd be seriously amiss if I didn't remind people that we have to address the prevention side as well. If we want to slow the number of people coming into the cancer pool, and with 35 million new cases expected by 2050, this is going to be a real challenge. And yet, on the prevention side, we know many of the risks. Smoking is still way up there, number one, and yet we have a wide range of ways of dealing with everything from tobacco harm reduction through to some of the advanced methods of cessation. Second, of course, some of the dietary related issues are critical. Alcohol becomes really important. Vaccines and infectious diseases become pretty crucial, and we are seeing how cervical cancer is probably going to get on top of maybe even eliminating it through the use of vaccines. The question is going to be, what is the role of AI on the prevention side? And of course, the answer is there are many ways. The use of chatbots, the way of personalizing your preventive messages, encouraging physical activity, screening, positive health behaviors, testing whether you actually are staying, once you quit smoking, that you're staying off it. One horrific figure to think about is that maybe 20 to 30% of all cancers are still driven by smoking. And if you look at when people are diagnosed with cancer, it's about 20 to 30% will have been smokers. A year later, a similar proportion are still smoking, suggesting that we are failing in the system. And often people will go on to advanced cancer treatments, and yet there isn't the supportive side on the prevention, whether it's either, as I say, on diet, alcohol, or smoking. And that's where I think that our AI bot systems, some of the more personalized approaches, could make a huge difference.
A related question to that, I've recently heard of a couple of examples of companies that are applying AI to medical education. We have such a shortage of nurses in particular. Yeah. So how can you apply AI to education?
Well, I'm pleased you mentioned generally the educational field, but also the health workforce. I mean, just to think about at the base of cancer in America, we think of the oncologists. So we have 25 to 30,000 oncologists in the US. In Kenya, they're less than 100. Less than 100 for a population of millions of people. So the educational issue is important, but AI in the hands of a nurse will give them the world knowledge of what's available to the best oncologists sitting in the US. And so I think this interface of how we train our healthcare workforce using AI tools to give them access in real time to the best way of being able to make an early diagnosis, to ensure people are put onto the best treatment, is going to have huge benefits in parts of the world where there may be zero oncologists in the country, which is well over 20 countries in Africa have zero oncologists. We're talking about how we're going to make AI work. Well, you're going to have to put these tools in the hands of nurses and even community health workers. There's a huge opportunity to do that. And in fact, we're already starting to see it. I mentioned Bristol Myers working with Catholic Medical Mission Board in Kenya and Zambia. I know that the Clinton Health Access Initiative is also working in a number of these countries, trying to actually use the healthcare providers on the ground to address cancer in different ways. And AI would not be a luxury. It would be really a life-saving measure to actually have the world's knowledge at the fingertip right in the deep rural parts of Africa.
So I'm going to give a little shout out to a VC incubator called ThinkHat. And they just showed me, a system and it's all about AI for medical education globally. So yeah, so that's interesting. Okay, guys, so we have not that much time, and I would still have many questions, but why don't we switch to our attendees to ask some questions? So we've got Isabel, I think, scanning some of the questions we've got out there. By the way, the one thing I've got to get this in before we go out there, ethics issues, data privacy, HIPAA compliance.
Yeah.
Derek, what might you give us about that before we go to other questions?
We've got to address it all. I mean, I think the issues of confidentiality, privacy, and again, while AI is going to be important, but they're also going to be solutions. And blockchaining, the whole chain of information and use of drugs and diagnostics and so on is imminently feasible. But I think the importance of dealing with privacy and confidentiality may not be as much that there are real breaks in the system, but that people's trust in the system depends upon them feeling that they can trust that their data will not actually be shared in ways they don't want it to be shared. And I know that all of the people involved in AI are looking at how you can deal with that. So there are many ethical issues. That's one. The other one, of course, is biased algorithms, where we're already seeing great studies showing that pathology specimens run through AI are able to show bias in terms of where the original sample came from. And I think that the moment you start thinking about what are the ethical issues, the two big ones will be privacy and biased algorithms. We can start tackling them.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, Derek, I was just thinking we need big biobanks in Nairobi and in Calcutta, and so that we have amazing genetic diversity in these biobanks, so that these data sets that all the companies I've been mentioning today are using to do drug discovery actually are looking at remedies for everyone. And
Yeah,
not only
no, and the good news, Garvin, is that we've now got the development of large-scale cohorts in Africa. Wellcome Trust has been investing, and in Chennai. So this is entirely feasible.
fantastic. And I think that not only will it result in better bespoke treatments for those populations, but also give a better collective idea of the entire human genome and result in better remedies for everyone. So
Exactly.
here again, positive sum collaboration.
Cool. Guys, thank you so much. Isabel, what have you got out there? I know we need to dig in deeper, but
Sure.
we wanted to give a broad outline.
Yeah, sure. We don't have too many questions right now, but maybe just given the time, a closing question to both Garv and Derek here. So Garv, if an investor wants to be on the right side of history regarding oncology, what is the one mental shift they need to make today? Is it moving from treating sickness to managing risk? And where is the capital most effectively deployed to do that?
I think that the shift is realizing that data is the new therapeutic, if you like. The future isn't just giving a pill, right? It's using real-time data to personalize therapeutics. And I'm interested in Derek's feedback on that, of course. And we're seeing this with, I mentioned them, Erica, when you gave your 2030 question to open the call, Tempus AI, connecting clinical data with molecular data to help practitioners make real-time decisions, building a learning healthcare system where every patient's outcome teaches the AI how to treat the next patient better. And this also helps close the equality gap, because using Tempus's platform, or one like it doesn't have to be Tempus, means that a nurse in a remote village somewhere has access to the same protocol as an oncologist in New York City. Or consider another one of our longtime holdings, Moderna. People know them for COVID, but their personalized cancer platform, mRNA 4157, if you're interested, is essentially software for the immune system. It's coding a unique instruction set for your tumor. So the answer to the question, Isabel, is the mental shift is this: don't just invest in a drug, invest in the intelligence infrastructure, the data platform, the diagnostics that makes the drug actually work.
So I need to do a shameless pitch for my company. I am delighted to be working on the next economics theory with Garvin. For those of you who know me, you know I've been here for about 4 or 5 months. And the reason I came was precisely this kind of dialogue. It's about the future. It's about persistence. It's about resilience. And this is how we invest in our next economy funds. And in particular, you should know that, again, those of you who know me, I don't trust easily. My entire family, my little daughters, have been in the NXTE for years and years. And we're delighted. So apologize for the shameless pitch. Isabel, any last questions, biggies that we should get to?
No, I just, I'll just ask Derek if he had any follow-up on what Garb answered
Yeah.
last. Other than that, I think, yeah.
I think just really a very simple observation that I think we've focused very heavily and rightly on survival, and the statistics are going in the right direction. We now need to add in quality of life measures, and that's going to be a whole new ball game and opportunity for functional improvements, taking the whole person into account. And that's where AI could really come into its own, building from the world of how we've promoted healthy lifestyles in general, to actually making sure that you're going to live longer, healthier, happier, pain-free, less suffering lives, as opposed to simply focusing on survival. And I think that's going to be the next big frontier.
We are perfectly on time. Oh, we went a minute over. I think that's pretty good. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And for those who dialed in, we're here for follow-up calls. And it's really it's a privilege to have you, Derek and Garvin. And we'll all talk very soon. Happy and healthy holidays.
Thank you. And
Thanks,
to you
everyone.
too. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.